Welcome back, and in this segment we'll be talking about the importance of the River Nile and the significance of it as the artery of life in Egypt. And out of that, actually Egypt has been keen to maintain friendly relations with Nile Basin countries as part of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's continued efforts to enhance the Egyptian-African relations. He visited Tanzania, Rwanda, Gabon and Chad. President el-Sisi visited 21 African countries out of 69 foreign visits since he took office, representing 30% of his visits. Also, the president held 112 meetings with the African leaders and officials who visited Egypt over the last 3 years. Out of 543 presidential meetings with leaders and senior officials of the world as well as international organizations. The political discourse of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, both internally and externally, emphasizes the historical and strategic importance of the Egyptian-African relations and the pride of Egypt in its African belonging. And we're happy to have with us today Dr. Ahmed Ezz, the honorary leader of the WAFT party. Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon to you.
Thank you very much.
Is my voice clear?
Yes,
yes, sir.
Very good.
And definitely there's no better place to speak about Nile.
Except on the Nile.
Exactly. So we'd like to know from you more about, the importance of, talking about this topic. The Nile represents tourism, represents economy, represents, life to Egypt. And please.
I'm glad and proud that President Sisi turned the enmity of the African countries towards Egypt for obvious reasons in the past 180 degrees to a very good friendship now. If you see what happened during the previous era, without mentioning names, we became enemies with Africa. We cut the relations with Africa. President Sisi, in this short time, could convert it 180 degrees to a solid friendship. If you see, just one example, yesterday, with a meeting with the president of Chad, explaining to him the problems caused by terrorism and so on. It ended up that Chad cut diplomatic relations and kicked out the Qatar ambassador same day. This would not have happened unless there is confidence in the man who's giving them this information. And you should see, even with Ethiopia, I'm not worried. The Nile will flow anyhow. And if we cannot agree on a schedule for filling the dam, it will annoy us for a couple of years or so.
Yes.
But in the end, the water will flow and our share will come to us without any doubt about it. So I'm really proud and grateful that this man could do this in such a short time. If you remember, for instance, 3 years ago or 2 years ago, Egypt was cut off the African Union, the Organization of African Unity, accused of having a coup d'etat. And when they see 33 million Egyptians, the biggest ever demonstration in history, supporting the kicking out of the terrorist government, they couldn't keep saying it's a coup d'etat.
Yes.
Huh?
So, sir, it's the visits for President Sisi is almost like 1/3 of his foreign visits was focused on Africa. So, like Rasha said, it's 21 African countries.
Sorry.
So the focus of the president on the foreign visits, 1/3 of the total visits of the president was focused on African countries.
Absolutely.
What would that tell us, in terms of the
It
focus?
represents the feeling that we are partners in the same fate. We are partners against the colonial plots against us, against the Western siege of Africa and the Arabs, against all what is happening. And let's not be so polite and say what you call relation with the friendly West. The West is enemy, and America is our first enemy. And anything, of course, as a president, he has to keep relations and keep certain channels open. But the fact remains that terrorism is made in USA, exported from USA, and we are suffering from it. Who are suffering? The Arab countries and the African countries. So we are partners in the same fate. And we have to see this clearly and not fool ourselves about having, oh, they got the lesson and they will stop. No, they will not. They will keep behind their plot as long as they can execute it. But they will not succeed because the Egyptians are so aware, despite all the economic troubles and all the siege and everything being done to us, the Egyptians are withstanding it, suffering, but withstanding it because they know that the man leaves no alternative and has no alternative but to continue this future policy. The infrastructure he is doing is the only way to build a future, to build economy. And all the doubt they are throwing, our enemies, against his projects, Egyptians are well aware that it's rumors, lies, and they do not take it.
Doctor, I'd like to ask you about how do you see the Egyptian participation in the various African summits which were attended by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yes. How do you see the efforts and how do you evaluate, like, for instance, the African Union summit, the outcome of it, as well as the Nile Basin Initiative? We'd like your evaluation of this.
He convinced the African countries that Egypt is an African country as well as it's Arab. But it's African before being Arab and Arab before it's being African. It's one unit of this structure. And he succeeded tremendously in convincing the African countries that Egypt is part of their world.
Yes. So, sir, you don't see a threat today with the Ethiopian dam?
No. I know that it might be a nuisance for a couple of years if they fill it at a quicker rate than they should. But in the end, the water will fall. They cannot stop it. The water will fall down and will come to us no matter what they do. And I think that even Ethiopia...
You mean scientifically or by relations?
No, scientifically.
Scientifically, it's flowing in all cases.
It's flowing. You cannot stop it.
Yes.
If you stop it, the east of Sudan will go underwater.
Okay.
And I think that even Ethiopia is reconsidering its way with Egypt.
Yes.
And all provocation from enemies of Egypt to Ethiopia is not, to my way of thinking, succeeding.
Yes.
Doctor, Egypt is currently heading a variety of important posts, like, for instance, the non-permanent membership of the Security Council, the chairmanship of the African Union's Climate Change Committee, as well as the membership in the African Peace and Security Council, and as well the African Union support for the nomination of Ambassador Mushira Khattab as the representative of the continent at the head of the UNESCO. Now, how do you see that and the significance of it?
About Ambassador Mushira Khattab,
Yes.
as much as I love to see her elected, I don't think we will succeed in that. Why? Because the Western last move from France to put a candidate, which is a French minister, or ex-whatever, daughter of a Jew from Morocco. All this trick means that they are having a plan not to give us this place. But when you look at what we have already succeeded in, from being chastised from the African Union to being the overwhelming majority of African unity electing Egypt for the Security Council, which is a tremendous change. But about the UNESCO, I hope, but I don't think we will make it, unfortunately.
Do you feel that there are certain propaganda or a type of promotion approaching some leaders, or do you feel that the backdoor negotiations and what goes on in the back corridors are stronger than us?
Not stronger, I mean the West,
Yeah.
which is fighting us, which is leading all the campaign against us, no matter what nice words we use. Cannot see Egypt succeeding too much. And the post of UNESCO is a post sensitive morally. They don't want us to have it.
Yes.
That's my inner feeling. I hope I'm wrong and that Ambassador Mushira will make it.
Right. Looking at another aspect, the relation with Egypt and the African countries, but there's also the aspect of investments, investments between those countries, the African countries. And looking at Africa, the richness from the touristic aspect, from a lot of business aspects too, do you think today the investment level is at a good stage, or it needs a lot of development in order to take its right positioning?
Not really, because unfortunately we don't have what each of us need from the other. They have raw material, we have. The only thing Egypt can develop is Egyptian industry, because it suits very much the African level. But condition that it would be good industry, and like the old days when Al Nasr company was working, it was working successful because you were selling goods at a reasonable price to people who need it. But you cannot exchange what you call
raw material or resources.
normal. I mean, you have commodities, they have commodities. What can you exchange?
Yeah, but maybe services, maybe a transportation system between the African countries opens up, services.
I hope that Egypt's private sector will realize that the Chinese genius doing in Africa is the example we should imitate. China has won Africa without putting one single soldier on the African continent.
Yeah.
And it's giving Africa what it needs.
Yes.
The Chinese goods are, as you know, very different categories and qualities. Each can have what he can pay for.
Yeah.
Doctor,
Very true.
you've just mentioned China and its cooperation with our African or the African countries. So how can Egypt contribute and help its African neighbors and the African continent?
The soft power of Egypt in culture, and many of these countries are majority Muslims, we can help them with good orators, not the present standard of oration, unfortunately. Good orators can be there, that's soft power. The Egyptian films, I was surprised when I went to Morocco many years ago, that the language they know about us is the Egyptian cinema. They know our artists more than I do. They talk our dialect. We have a very, very good element in soft power. And that's not only with the Arab Africa, but with Black Africa, because many of them has need for Egyptian soft power, apart from the trade.
Okay. Interesting. So let's maybe would like to take an outlook about Egypt. Since you're being here, you have a lot of political experience. How are you seeing the outlook, the political outlook for Egypt today, and the future, you know, looking also about for presidential elections that are coming up?
The presidential election is coming up, and Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will be re-elected by a majority, maybe less than the previous majority, but it will be an overwhelming majority. A lot of fight and unfair campaign has been directed against this man, exploiting the political, the economic situation, and we all know that it is not Sisi's fault, and that he is doing his utmost. And people feel he is sincere, and he is what I call the president of the necessity. We cannot have this period without Abdel Fattah al-Sisi or somebody that he represents.
Now, this year, the African Union's main theme was the demographic dissidence of youth, making use of the youth of the African continent. How can we benefit and utilize our youth for the welfare of our continent?
We have a lot to offer them. As I say, the soft power, the medical help, the educational help, the grants. Within our capacity, we can have a lot of personal relations with so many African aspects. And I wish we exploit it to the extent, because we have it. They need it, and we need to export it. When you send Egyptian teachers, say, for teaching Arabic, or that's export. That's commodity, or say. It's a soft power, but it's commodity.
Also, another important theme was discussed at the African Union was disarmament of the African continents within 3 years, getting rid of disputes and disarmaments within 3 years. I think that that's another important topic, but we need to cover it in another segment. I'd like to thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed Ezz Al-Arab, the honorary chairman of the WAFD party, for this interview. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you for giving this chance, especially on the Nile side.
Thank you very much.
This is my big love, the Nile.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And now we will be going to a quick break, but we'll be back for more on Nile Cruise, so stay with us.
Thank you.